So let's talk about War Games. War Games is a story of the 1936 Olympics, which were held in Berlin, the capital of Germany. Now, these are often called the Nazi Olympics because these were held when Germany was ruled by the Nazi Party, right? So World War II is going to start in 1939. This is 1936. So World War II hasn't started, not yet. It's 3 years away. It's pretty close. But Germany is not at war with the world, not yet. They will be very soon. So before the war, we didn't know really the extent of all the bad stuff that the Nazis were doing. We had ideas, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the world didn't know everything bad that the Nazis were doing. And the Nazis, they saw this Olympics as an opportunity to invite the world to Germany and show them how great they were. They wanted to say, hey, look at our fascist government and how great we are at running our country. They also wanted to bring people in and to demonstrate their ideas of white racial supremacy. They wanted to say, they believed that they as an Aryan race were stronger and faster and smarter than everybody else. And they saw the Olympics as the perfect opportunity to show the world that they were the best people in the world. They're going to be disproved of that, but that was part of the reason that they wanted to put on this show for the entire world. So into this world of the Berlin Olympics in 1936 comes my main character. Her name is Eevee Harris. She is 13 years old, and she is a gymnast. She is going to Berlin with dreams of winning a gold medal as a competitor on the women's gymnastics team for the United States. So Eevee was born and raised in Oklahoma, but she and her family had to leave 2 years ago to move to California because of the Dust Bowl. So maybe you've read about this in class or seen it in a book. The Dust Bowl was a period of really severe drought that ravaged the Central Plains states in the United States for an entire decade. For like 1930 to 1940, almost no rain fell in the central part of the United States. And it was devastating, especially to all the people who had farms that needed that water for their crops, right? But also, not only did it kill all their crops because they didn't get enough water, when it rains, all that water seeps into the soil and kind of holds it down so that when the wind comes tearing through, it doesn't lift up that dirt. But without that rain, the wind would come through and it just stripped up the topsoil from the ground and whipped it up all into the air. And they became these huge dust storms that were called black blizzards. They were called black blizzards because when you were in the middle of one, it was like a total blackout. You couldn't see anything. You couldn't hear anything. You couldn't breathe. Like people were wearing masks during this time, like we did during COVID. But so they didn't breathe in the dust because the dust could get in your lungs and kill you if you breathed in too much of the dust. These storms were huge. Sometimes they were as big as a county, sometimes as big as an entire state. And they would sweep through and bury everything in their path. If you look at that top picture, you can see that's a car that's buried by the dust and the sand that's left behind by one of these storms. They would bury cars, they would bury houses, they would bury livestock. Sometimes they would bury people if they couldn't get out of the way in time. And these storms were massive. Sometimes they would go as far east as Washington, D.C., like sweep that far in the east. And sometimes they would sweep as far west as Washington State in the Pacific Northwest. Eevee and her family, they were farmers. They had a farm. They kept getting hit by dust storm after dust storm after dust storm. And it just killed all their crops. It made it so they couldn't grow any food. It made it so they couldn't make any money. And they couldn't afford anything to eat. So Eevee's father, he leaves the house. He goes into the nearest town hoping that he can find some kind of a job to help support his family. But when he gets to the next town, he finds that there are no jobs for him or anybody else because all of this happened right at the same time as the Great Depression. So the Great Depression began with the Wall Street crash of 1929. So a whole bunch of stocks bottomed out and people lost all the money they had invested. And banks had invested in the stock market. And so they lost money. So then people went to the bank and said, I want my money back. And the bank was like, I don't have your money. And all the banks closed and all the people lost their money. And then a bunch of businesses started to fail because they had invested in the stock market and had money in banks. And so when those businesses failed, people lost their jobs. Millions and millions of Americans lost their jobs. It was the beginning of what we call the Great Depression, and it was a huge economic downturn for the United States. It was a disaster for the United States. You had people standing in bread lines and soup kitchen lines, like that picture at the top left, because they needed free food. They didn't have any money to buy food for themselves. In that picture to the right, you can see there's a person who's like, I have all these skills, I have a family to support, and all I want is a job, one job. And there's no jobs available for them. And then you had people who would move from town to town looking for jobs. And they had towns would put up these big signs that say, we're sorry, we don't have jobs for our own people. Keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. It was a brutal time in the United States, all over the United States. And it was worse for the people in the central states. It was like a 1-2 punch of the people who lived in the Dust Bowl. Not only did they have these black blizzards sweeping through and a huge drought, but there were no jobs in the cities for them either. So Eevee's father can't find work. He comes back and he's like, guys, I don't know what we're going to do. So what they end up doing is what millions of other people in the Central Plains states do. They pack everything up in their cars and their trucks, and they leave. About 3.5 million people in the Plain states, the central states in the United States, abandoned their farms to leave and try to find some place where they could make a new life for themselves. We call these folks Okies because a lot of them came from Oklahoma. But that term now refers to like all the people from all the states, like Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska. There was a whole central part of the country, and even more states than that, where people were forced to leave because there was no rain, there was no food, there was no jobs. They were just dying out there. So they loaded everything they had into trucks and cars and they left, and most of them went west to California. When I was doing research for this book, I ran into this amazing statistic. Something like 1/6 of all Californians today can trace their ancestry back to Oklahoma, right? Like 1/6 of all the people who live in California, their ancestors got there by leaving Oklahoma during the Dust Bowl. That's wild. So like millions of others, Eevee and her family, they pack everything they own in their truck and they go west to California. But when they get there and Eevee's dad tries to find work again, like there's no jobs. Yes, there's no dust storms. That's great. Yay, they're not breathing in that dust all the time. But now it's the Depression, and there's no jobs for Californians, and there's no jobs for all these Okies who've come in from the Central Plains states. So Eevee and her family, they have no money for food. They have no money for a house to rent it or buy it. And so they start living out of their car. Eevee and her family are now homeless. Now, Eevee, she still goes to school. And her school has a brand new gym. The gym was built by the Works Progress Administration. The Works Progress Administration was a group set up by the United States government to help give jobs to people at a time when people desperately needed jobs. They're like, look, we want to give you money to go and buy food, but we would like you to do something in return for it. So maybe you can build a gym for this school. Maybe you can help build a road through the mountains. If you're creative, maybe you can write a play or do this poster for us, draw this poster. Like they basically hired people to do the jobs that they were good at to give them money to be able to buy food with. And so there's a new gym built at Eevee's school. And she still goes to school, even though she's homeless and living out of her car. And in the afternoons, rather than go back to where her family is parked in that car, living in that car, she will spend as much time as she can at school. And so she goes into the gym after school, and they have a gymnastics club, and she joins it. And this becomes her refuge. It's Eevee's place to escape from her family's financial troubles and their tragic journey from Oklahoma to California. She can just focus on gymnastics and let everything else go. All the problems that she has in her life disappear, and she can just lose herself in the gymnastics. And it's amazing for her. But also, all that practice makes her really, really good. She gets so good that soon she's competing against high schoolers and then college students. And eventually, she gets good enough to be named to the U.S. Olympic team going to Berlin in 1936. So her dream, of course, like I said, is to win a gold medal. But Eevee has another dream that's attached to that that's kind of unique to the 1930s. Back in the 1930s, it was really common for people who became famous in the Olympics to then get cast in movies as Hollywood movie stars. Hollywood would wait for you to become famous as an athlete. And then they would say, if we put this person who's famous from the Olympics into our movie, a lot of people will come see it. Because remember, this is before television. So the only way you could see these athletes that you'd heard about on the radio or read about in the newspaper was to go and see them in a movie. So Hollywood would cast all of these former Olympic champions as in their movies so that people would come out and see the movies. You had people like Eleanor Holm up there in the top left, Duke Kahanamoku, Buster Crabbe, Jim Thorpe, Johnny Weissmuller. All of these people had won medals at the Olympics and become famous. And then Hollywood said, we want you in our movie. And they would sell tickets to all those movies. Eevee sees this and she thinks, oh, wow, wait a minute. If I win a gold medal, maybe, I already live in California, maybe one of these Hollywood studios will put me into a movie and then I'll become rich, not just famous, but rich. And then my dad won't have to find a job and I could buy a house for my family. Like, this is her way. She thinks that she might be able to help her family. She's only 13 years old. She can't get like a big job or anything, not yet. But this, if it worked, she could help set her family for life. So how realistic is this dream? She doesn't know, but she knows it's possible. And so for Eevee, like, it's a real path out of poverty for her and her family. Everything is riding on this as Eevee goes to Berlin to compete in the Olympics. So when she gets there, she finds a bright, shining, modern city in Berlin. This, remember, is Germany on the rebound. Germany was on the losing side of World War I. And when they lost, they had to pay the Allies a whole lot of money. So they lost a lot of money. And they lost, remember, one whole generation of their young men who died in the war. And a lot of their cities had been beat up by bullets and bombs. So Germany, after World War I, was really already in their own Great Depression before the United States had one. This was just a couple of decades earlier. And they were really struggling. So a new political party ran for office. They were called the Nazis. And they said, hey, if you elect us, we will make Germany great again. We will make sure that everybody has jobs. We'll make sure that there's food on the shelves. We'll get everything cleaned up. We'll get us back to our former glory. And people said, okay, they had nothing else to lose, so they elected them. And then very slowly, the Nazis began to sort of take control of the government and stop having elections. And people were kind of upset about that. But at the same time, the Nazis were actually doing what they said they would do. Suddenly, everybody did have jobs. They were able to get food and put it on the shelves so people could buy food at the supermarkets. They cleaned up all the streets. Suddenly, the homeless people were gone off the streets. There was no graffiti on the buildings. All the trains ran on time. The Nazis seemed like they were getting everything back in order. And people really loved it. Now, there was a lot of bad stuff going on behind the scenes, and people maybe knew or didn't know, but one way or another, they accepted it because it seemed like everything on the surface was great. We're going to get into that again about what all the bad stuff is going on. But on the surface, to the people of Germany and to all the athletes who came to the Olympics and all their coaches and all the journalists from other countries and all the fans from other countries, it looked like the Nazis had Germany on the rebound. The centerpiece of the Berlin Olympics was the Olympia Stadium, where all the track and field events and the opening and closing ceremonies would take place. This building was a modern architectural marvel for the day. It was huge. It held 100,000 people in it. And it's actually such a sturdy and well-built building that it's still used today, that even after World War II, when it got hit with bombs and shot up with bullets, it survived, and they still use it to play soccer games in today. This also, the 1936 Berlin Olympics, was really modern in other ways too. They were the first Olympics to open with a torch relay from Athens. Maybe when you watch the Olympics now, you've seen this. They'll start in Athens, the site of the original ancient Olympics, and they'll run the torch around the world to wherever the Olympics are, and they'll drop that, they'll like tip it into a big cauldron, and it'll go whoosh and light up, and the cauldron will be burning for the entire time that the Olympics are happening. That all started here. The Nazis were the very first people to invent the torch relay. They were also the first ones to televise the Olympics. That thing in that bottom picture is not a cannon. It looks like it because it's so big. That is, in fact, a television camera. And that is what they were using to televise the Olympics for the very first time. It was really primitive television, but it was the first one to be put on TV. And they had aerial coverage up top provided by the Hindenburg, an enormous airship that was almost as long as the Empire State Building is tall. Some of you may know a little bit about the Hindenburg, famously that it crashes and burns later on, just a few years later. So thank goodness it didn't crash and burn over a stadium full of 100,000 people. But it didn't, and at the time, it was kind of amazing to see this thing flying overhead, this enormous airship, taking pictures and sending it to the newspapers. This was it was quite a show the Nazis were putting on. Yes, Eevee and a lot of the other athletes think there's something very creepy about Germany's new leader, Adolf Hitler, who is watching over the games with his Nazi henchmen from his box high up in the stands. And Eevee knows that there are a lot of people back home in America and around the world who hate Hitler and the Nazis because before she left, there were calls for a boycott. So a boycott is where you decide you don't want to send your people to participate in an event because you don't like the hosts. You disagree with the way that they run their country, or you disagree with who they are. And so you say, I'm not going to come play in your games because I don't want to normalize you. I don't want to pretend like you're a good person or that we're just going to overlook all the bad stuff that you're doing, right? So there were groups in the United States who called for us not to send our athletes to Germany. They wanted us to boycott the games. There were Jewish American groups and Black American groups and trade unions and Catholic groups who said, hey, guys, we have friends and family in Germany, and they are writing letters to us and telling us that really, really bad stuff is happening. They're telling us that the Nazis are persecuting them, that really bad stuff is happening to them, and we can't go over there to the Olympics and pretend like all this is okay. Like if we go over there and we participate in the Olympics without criticizing them or saying anything about it, it's like we're going to be accepting it. It's like a silent acceptance of what they're doing. And there were a lot of calls for us to boycott the Olympics and other countries around the world as well. So the Nazis, they heard this, and they were really worried that people would not come and participate in their games. And they really wanted people to show up and come to the games so they could show off how great they were. So they quickly swept all the bad stuff they were doing under the rug, and they hid it. And they invited people from all over the country to come in, like the Olympic chairman, to come in and tour Berlin. And they were like, hey, look, we're not persecuting Jewish people. We're not persecuting Black people or Catholics or unions. Like we're everything's great. Everybody's happy. And of course, they showed the Olympic chairman exactly what they wanted to see, because all these Olympic chairmen actually wanted to participate in the Olympics. So they went back to their countries and they're like, yeah, I went over there. There's nothing bad going on. We should totally send our people. At least they're making there's a lot of noise, but there's not a lot going on over there. So almost all the countries of the world did end up sending their athletes, including the United States. Now, Eevee, she's not interested in politics. She's heard about all this stuff. She knows about Hitler. She knows about the Nazis. She knows there have been calls for a boycott, but she is not interested in any of that stuff. She is just there to win a medal, become famous, and lift her family out of poverty. She's got enough things to worry about on her own without worrying about Hitler and the Nazis, right? And most of the other athletes felt the same way. They just wanted to go there and compete and win their event. They didn't want to think about all the bigger stuff that was going on. So Eevee starts to compete. But before she's really gotten going in the competition, she is approached by a shadowy character named Solomon Mundy. He's English, and he comes to Eevee with a startling proposal. He says, hey, Eevee Harris, I've been watching you, and I think that you and your family could use some money. Am I right? She's like, well, yeah. And he says, how would you like to leave Germany with millions of dollars in your pocket? She's like, I'm listening. And he says, while we have the Olympics as a distraction, and while we have all of these international athletes to choose from, I am putting together a team of elite Olympic athletes. And together, we are going to rob the Reichsbank, the German National Bank. We are going to steal millions of dollars in Nazi gold. He says, I already have a German weightlifter, I have a French diver, and now I need a gymnast to join my team to get us past the last of the security measures and booby traps. Will you join my heist team? Now, Eevee, for a minute, she's really interested. For a hot minute, she's considering it. And she's like, wow, millions of dollars. That would be amazing. I wouldn't have to win a gold medal. I wouldn't have to become a movie star. My dad would never have to work again. I could buy my family a house. We could be rich. We could never have to worry about money or food ever again. We'd be set. But then she's like, wait a minute. No, wait, it's hard enough to win a gold medal at the Olympics. But to steal money from a German bank, that is super dangerous. We could get arrested or even worse, we could get killed. No. She's like, I appreciate the offer, but I have a mission here. I think I'm good enough to win a gold medal, and then I'm hoping I can get noticed by Hollywood. I have a thing I'm doing. You guys do your thing. I'm going to do mine. They're like, okay, that's cool. If you don't want in, good luck to you in the Olympics, but let us know if you change your mind. So Eevee, she begins to compete, and she's competing alongside more famous American stars that you may have heard of. So that picture at the top left, that is the University of Washington's rowing team, who were the underdog winners of the gold medal in the rowing race. You may know them more famously now as the characters in the book and the film The Boys in the Boat. Down at the bottom, that person's name is Louis Zamperini. He's a marathon runner for the United States, and he wasn't as famous during the Olympics as he would become famous during World War II, when his fighter plane was shot down over the Pacific and he was taken prisoner by the Japanese, and his story became the book and the film Unbroken, right? That's the guy from that. But of course, the most famous athlete back then at the 1936 Berlin Olympics, and still today from that time period, was Black American track star Jesse Owens, who went to Berlin and won 4 gold medals in the 4 Olympic events that he competed in, single-handedly disproving all these Nazi ideas of white supremacy. His performance was amazing and legendary. And all these people are competing at the same time as Eevee. And she gets to see some of them and cheer them on. So Eevee, she's doing really well too. She is progressing through the different rounds of her competition, and she has got her eyes set on that gold medal. But the longer she is in Berlin, the more she begins to see the darkness behind Germany's apparent return to glory. She begins to see all the darkness behind the glitz and glamour of the Olympics. She sees that the Nazis are confiscating Jewish businesses and Jewish homes and making those people disappear. She sees that they are taking books that they don't like and banning them and burning them in big bonfires. She sees that they are arresting gay Germans and shutting down gay social clubs. Now she sees why there's no homeless people on the street. They're not finding homes for them. They are arresting them and throwing them in jail. They don't get homes, they get prison cells. And she sees that the Germans are sending in the National Army to police German cities in the name of maintaining order. But maybe scariest of all, Eevee sees that Germany is building up an army to go to war with the world again. And Eevee's like, oh, dang it. No. She just wanted to focus on gymnastics, not politics. But the more she sees, the more she knows how bad this is. And she cannot just sit by and watch while the Nazis carry out this reign of terror on their own people. She wants to do something about it. But what can she do? She's 13 years old. She has no power over the Nazis. She can't fight the Nazis. And she's like, wait a minute. That guy, Solomon Monday, he said that they were going to steal money from the German National Bank. And yes, if I take part in it, I'll come away with millions of dollars in money and gold. That's awesome. But if we're stealing it from the Nazis, that would be a great way to stick it to the Nazis. Like if we stole their money, maybe they couldn't do some of this bad stuff that they are doing. So she goes back to Solomon Monday and she's like, hey, have you robbed that bank yet? He's like, nope, we are still looking for a gymnast for the team. She says, okay, I'm in. And Eevee joins the heist team. Now, all they have to do is get past all the booby traps and security measures. Now they tell her all of the things that they have to get past. So the vault, this is all based on real stuff, by the way. The Reichsbank vault had all these security measures and booby traps in it. First of all, it's 500 feet underground. So you have to take a bunch of elevators to get there. And the last elevator to get down to the vault, you have to pick up a phone and be the bank manager and call in and say, all right, turn on the elevator. They can't do that because they're not going to have the bank manager there. So they're going to have to go down through the empty elevator shaft. The problem is it's electric. The walls are electrified. And if they touch it, they will be fried. If they get down to the bottom, there's a big round vault door to get through, and it has a combination lock on it. And they don't know the combination. And Eevee's like, you don't know the combination? Like, no, we'll figure it out. She's like, great. So once they get past that, if they get past it, and they get inside the vault, there are 2 guards. This was real. There were 2 guards who had an apartment in the vault 500 feet underground and lived there 24/7. And they would take turns patrolling the outside of the vault underground to make sure nobody was drilling their way in. It was incredible. But the most dangerous security measure of all is that the vault was built under a river. And if you're in that vault and you set off the alarm and you don't turn it off in time, there's a pipe that leads from the river to the vault, and a valve will open in that pipe, and river water will flood down and fill up the entire vault, drowning anybody and everybody inside. And Eevee's like, are you kidding? Like, we're not going to get caught by the Nazis and arrested. We're going to die in there. And Solomon Mundy's like, no. I think that with all of our combined Olympic talents, we can get past all of these security measures and traps. So they start working on it. So now Eevee is working on training for the vault heist while she's also training for the Olympics. And Eevee has one last thing to worry about, and it's this kid. His name is Heinz. He is a volunteer who has been assigned to her. Each of the athletes got a kid, a youth services host, a boy or a girl, assigned to them as their volunteer helper while they were in Berlin. They would take them from the Olympic Village to their events or to the cafeteria or downtown to buy souvenirs. And Eevee's volunteer is Heinz, and he's about 13. He's kind of close to her age, and he's really nice. They become pretty good friends. He shows her around. He's rooting for her every time she's competing. She thinks he's a really nice guy. And then one day they're downtown, and they see this poster, the one that I've got here on the screen. And she's like, hey, Heinz, is that you? Like that looks exactly like you, that kid in the picture. He's like, yeah, that's me. She's like, that's incredible. Is that Adolf Hitler in the background? He's like, yeah, that's Adolf Hitler. She says, well, what does the sign say? I don't read German. And he says, well, basically, it's a recruitment poster for the Hitler Youth. So the Hitler Youth was like the Nazi Boy Scouts. It's what you joined when you wanted to grow up and be a soldier for Hitler. And she realizes her youth services host, her volunteer, Heinz, is like a super Nazi. He's literally the poster boy for the Hitler Youth. And she's like, great. Now, not only am I trying to rob a bank, which could get us caught or killed, I have to hide all of that stuff from Heinz, or he'll report me and all the other people on the heist team, and we will all be thrown into a jail or worse, right? So now she's got to worry about keeping everything from Heinz. So the big question for Eevee now is, can she stand up to evil and follow her Olympic dreams? And the way she will do that is the rest of the book. I cannot tell you the entire story. You have to go and actually read the book. Hopefully I've given you enough of a teaser to get you interested in reading War Games and see what happens to Eevee and her Olympic dreams and the heist.